Hello everybody and welcome back to the Enterprise Dish. While we are all sort of locked at home, leave it up to my man Dux to mix it up just a bit to keep me, keep us on our toes, which in these times I think we could all appreciate. How's it going, Dux?
Hey, beautiful weather today. I figured I'd do this outside and just to kind of, throw you off your game a bit because you're expecting me to be in my home office, right?
I expected you to be in your office just hanging out like the rest of us, but leave it to Dux, like I said, to go out into Mother Nature. Although I will say it looks like a beautiful day where you are.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's perfect weather, mid 60s, and I'm just taking all this in. And this is my afternoon walk, by the way, so timing is perfect. I can't just be in front of my computer all day long. I got to get some sun every day.
Yep, I hear you. I mean, it's that time of the year. So, Dux, there's been a lot of news, and I deliberately started pinging Dux on Sunday of all days, and thankfully Dux responded that there was going to be some Yammer news out, or Office 365 Teams news out, and I really want to get your opinion on this, because what Microsoft announced today is a new Yammer app for Teams, and it is going to be called Communities, and it's actually available starting today for desktop and web clients, and it's going to be coming later for mobile users. But what this does is it effectively brings almost all of Yammer, and it will bring all of Yammer eventually into Teams. So you can open up Teams, you can access all your Yammer stuff, and Microsoft used some language in there that says, hey, we're going to be bringing all the features so you can seamlessly communicate, which is all great. This is all good stuff. But my hunch here, Dux, is that Microsoft might be mashing Teams functionality or Yammer functionality into Teams. Now, I'm not saying Yammer's going away, but it seems like it's kind of being ratcheted down on the priority scale of Microsoft. What is your opinion? You are very well connected and understand this better than I do. I'm just curious on your thoughts.
I think first and foremost, I think this is not quite new. It's newish. In the past, Yammer already had apps for Teams. One of the big things that they're pushing this year is called the Year of Yammer is the positioning with Yammer, right? It's more around broadcast, corporate engagement, leadership communication, and they actually renamed Yammer groups into Yammer communities. So in the past, there's actually an app for Yammer groups where you can surface these Yammer groups, are now known as Yammer communities, into Teams. And I think this aligns with their positioning for Teams where, Microsoft wants Teams to be that one-stop shop where you go to work. And work is not just calling or chatting or working on documents. Work is also accessing corporate resources such as Yammer or such as non-Microsoft assets as well. So I think it's just bringing Yammer in, just like the same way they're bringing SharePoint into Teams, just having that one-stop shop. Microsoft already also has integrations with Yammer and Outlook, for example. So now when you're at Mention, you can see Yammer conversations surface in Outlook. And those are the two key places where people spend their time, Outlook and Teams. So I don't think Yammer's going to go away. I don't think there's going to be a lot of overlap per se. I think Yammer will continue to grow and focused on corporate-wide engagement versus Teams is getting work done with your immediate team, with your project colleagues, with your department.
Yeah, I think my kind of whole sticking point here, and to be completely clear, Microsoft very explicitly said to me, they said, Yammer is not going away. Now, I could make some caveats to that. They once told us that the old version of Edge had 330 million users and that Cortana is the future of everything. Things do change. That being said, I don't personally think Yammer is going away, but to me, it feels like maybe the importance of the standalone app is going to be less important going forward, less so than the functionality, which is now you can kind of get it to where you're working, is the way I kind of think about it. But, time will be the true arbiter of truth on all of this.
Look, the way I think about this, right, it's to each his own. So if you think back, forget Microsoft. If you think back in the mid-90s, the way we would consume news on the web is go to a news website like CNN, for example. Today, the CNN website's still there, but guess what? We consume it differently. It could be through talking to Siri or through news readers, or I consume my news through Twitter. So it's just providing those different channels where Yammer can be available in the same way SharePoint can be available. And Teams is one of the core positioning that Microsoft has where teams can work together. But I think Yammer as a platform will still be there. I can still go to the browser and get at it. But I agree with you, though. Like today, I live and breathe in teams.
Yep.
Everything comes in teams. Yeah.
I really like your analogy, by the way, and I might steal it. I'll give you credit, but I'm going to steal it probably. Of the news, right? The news of how we looked at it in the 90s, and now it kind of appears in the apps that we use. I like that analogy because I think that might be the approach that we see here going forward. It's a good one. I like that, Dux. So
Thank you. At least I contributed something to your show.
your show, Dux, this is very much our show. I can guarantee that people are tuning in to hear what you have to say about this stuff because you have the different vantage point than I do, right? I'm very much on the news side of the world. You're very much on the practitioner side of the world. You see things through an entirely different lens, which is why I love these conversations. But speaking of the news, just a couple quick highlights. Microsoft did announce that they're going to rebrand just a couple SKUs of Office 365. If you see things change, nothing's really changing other than the name. They're just moving, let's see, Office 365 Business Essentials, Business Premium, and a couple others, and they're dropping the Office name and just going to Microsoft 365 for those. So no, nothing to worry about. Just if you see that change on the documents, just keeping yourself heads up there. All right, Dux. We had a question come in, and it was specifically targeted for you, and it comes from Greg A., who gave us permission to use his name. He says, how am I going to secure Teams was the email subject. He said we had to quickly start using it after the COVID, and our small company has the basic settings applied. Effectively, what it sounds like is he rolled Teams out of the box. And I want to know if this is good enough for our data or if there's some other options that we should consider.
Very good question. So obviously the word security is a big word. It's a big thing to tackle, but I would say at the base level, what Microsoft offers is good enough, right? So one of the key things, if you have out of the box rolled out, 3 things you want to consider. Number 1 is how mature everybody's in the organization, because if you say out of the box, that means everybody can create Teams or SharePoint, and which is great, right? Self-service is definitely good. You don't want to be a bottleneck where people have to come to you to create these things. But at the same time, you have to remind folks that they should be accountable for things that they create. Who do they invite? Who are they sharing it with? When you say out of the box, I assume you didn't turn on external sharing, which is great. But long term, you might want to turn that on because you may want to collaborate with other people. And then, so what's your policy around that, right? Mm-hmm. So again, what are people responsible for and accountable for? The second thing you want to consider in terms of security is, I suspect most people are remote and they're working from home, especially today, is how are you set up to do multi-factor authentication? Again, out of the box, this is really not Teams, but more around Azure AD. So see if that's enabled, especially around authentication. That will help secure who's accessing your team, who has the ability to work alongside the teams that's already been created. The third thing is, more from a long-term perspective, how would you handle the life cycle of the team? Meaning, what if you're not using it anymore? Let's say the project is done. Will it just sit there? Who would be responsible for making sure that the data set of that team that's not being used anymore is archived or backed up or more importantly, deleted, right? Because you're not using it anymore, so it won't cause problems long term. So those 3 things think about, but out of the box, what Microsoft offers should suffice.
No, that's actually really good. And I know, and I'm going to give a cheap plug here, even though it's not cheap, to AvePoint, because I know you guys have some great new user documentation, just features overview, and even on the IT practitioner side. And we'll give some links down below, because we know, and I can tell you publicly on the air that Petri traffic to anything that we have that is remote desktop related, to remote administration related, to Teams related, like traffic for us, ironically, or not ironically, I should say, is through the roof on this stuff. Like we can literally see people trying to get help with this stuff. And we know that there's big struggles out there. And so I can assure you that AvePoint definitely has some documents, because I've looked at them personally, that will help you, on that journey as we all really rush through this.
And we have free tools that we offer, especially around this time. So like Brad says, we'll share the link below where you can access it.
Yep. And I promise you, this is not a webinar. I just trust Dux, and that's why he is here. And there are genuine needs out there. And this question, the reason why we actually got a couple of them, and we've answered some on the side, is that this is a very, very common question we've actually been getting, is people are just effectively being like, oh my God, we need a remote collaboration tool. What do we have available to us today? We're not using Skype for Business, or we weren't using whatever. Everybody go to use Teams. And this is a very, very common thing, especially, at least my hunch is, especially in the smaller to mid-size, couple hundred to a couple thousand employee companies, where they didn't really think about this, or they didn't have the capacity to do this stuff. And then all of a sudden it's like, bam, we're all using it, we're all in, and everyone's trying to get their feet underneath them as they roll this out.
I think, Brad, one thing that, in my opinion, that there needs to be more, maybe it's just me, but clarity and focus on when we use the word collaboration, right? Because if you think about Teams, at the end of the day, it's really communications and collaboration. And even if I break down communications, there's the instant messaging part, or the group chat, if you want to put it that way, and the calling and the video calling. So that's communication. And then the collaboration bit is more around working on documents, projects. So Teams is quite powerful, but the challenge is a lot of times people don't know it. So they think, I don't want to use Zoom because it's not as secure, so I want to use Teams. And then they bucket Teams as this video calling tool. Or let's not use Slack anymore, let's use Teams. But then that's the collab part, right? So I think there needs to be more clarity around these three things, and then use cases around it too, because people are just so used to separate apps, right?
Sure.
Zoom for calling, Box for file storage, Slack for collaboration, whereas Teams can do it all.
That's a really, really good point. And that all comes back to a lot of like the user education, right? People might think of it to exactly your point that, hey, this is just Skype for Business, right? We're just going to use it for chat, but there's a whole lot more going on there, and a lot of cool functionality, but you really got to take time to understand it. Make sure you're on the IT pro side, be a good practitioner of how you're going to enable your users to do that. And sage advice there, Ducks. Speaking of Teams, by the way, Microsoft also announced this week that they're going to be rolling out two things, custom backgrounds. So Ducks, in theory, could have put that up as his custom background. He could be on a walk. You never know. He could be at home. Could be at home.
You see somebody running through here, but this is not custom background. This is the real deal.
He is truly out in the world. And then the other feature is they're going to increase from a 2x2 grid to a 3x3 grid. So you'll have up to 9 participants up on the screen looking at you while you're presenting or doing whatever, if you so choose. So those are a couple features that Microsoft is going to be rolling out here soon.
One thing I do have to say about that, while certainly I think Microsoft is pushing that out, because with competition out there, Zoom has that capability, and frankly, it's really nice to see everybody, right?
Yep.
But one consideration is, especially for a lot of the IT pros, is the more videos you put out there, the more bandwidth it consumes. So imagine 9, 3x3, and maybe long term you get more people there. It's just gonna degrade the service that's being delivered as you're in that meeting, right? So unless you have really fast internet connection, then you see it degrade as you have more videos up.
No, that's a really good point, especially for those people who may not have excellent connectivity, or if they're using hotspots for that matter, and they're you're being charged by the gig. That is very, very important. I'm happy you brought that up, because I totally didn't even think about that. So very, very cool. So Mr. Ducks, you're out on your walk. What else is going on in your life? Obviously, you're at home. You're not technically at home right now, but you're in the home vicinity. How you doing? You surviving the work from home, whatever you want to call this thing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm grateful that we're 5 weeks already in. This is week 5 of shutdown, lockdown, whatever you want to call it. Grateful everybody's okay, friends and family and coworkers. My kids are adjusted for their 6-month vacation now, pretty much. But we're doing the best we can, and just really, really on the positive side. Really happy to see that a lot of people in their own little ways just stepping forward and doing whatever they can to support what's going on. And props to a lot of the frontline workers, our doctors, our nurses, folks delivering packages, folks in the grocery. So I'm really humbled to see a lot of these people still out there serving all of us despite the risks that they face.
Yeah, I mean, fully agree. It's I I always say things could be worse, and they realistically could be. And so hopefully we are flattening the curve, as they would say. It all appears that that is happening, but now we all just got to be patient, which I try to teach to my daughter so many times. And now I've got to be a practicer of patience. And, we'll get through this, and hopefully everything on the other side will be just as rosy as right before we all decided to camp at home effectively. So.
One story I'd love to share. So working with a lot of customers, especially government agencies, is it's so heartening to see that a lot of government agencies around the world are not only taking advantage of Teams for being able to remote work, but actually they're using Teams for COVID response. So, for example, I know the METSI is an organization in Twin Cities. They're an organization that supports a lot of the cities and counties around the Twin City area, Minneapolis, and they rolled out Teams to enable remote work, but also doing some COVID-19 response. I know, for example, a church, McLean Bible Church around in DC, they're actually all in Office 365. They're using Teams across volunteers to deliver food and help out a lot of the elderly. The Belgian police, for example, they're using Teams. Check this out. In their helicopters when they're doing surveillance, and they're doing live feed when they're doing chases, also using it for drones and whatnot. So a lot of cool stuff going on with technology. Yeah.
That might be the most edge of edge case scenarios for how to use Teams, but I love it. I mean, who thought we would be talking about the Belgian police? They may also make great waffles and great beer. So
exactly.
The Belgians, we are high on your praise list for right now. So very, very cool. Well, Dux, one last question for you here. As we're hanging out, as you're out in the world, what's your favorite feature in Teams?
Today, as more and more features are coming up, I think one of the coolest feature I came across recently is that and it's really small at the bottom. There's a way to praise your colleagues, and again, this is one of those things that, even though it's a little thing in technology, sometimes we take it for granted. But in these days where everybody's remote, just putting those little praises or emojis or giffies just to express yourself, right, and tell people how much you appreciate them, it means a lot. I mean, I can say when people share those things with me and say, hey, good job, Docs, I may not admit it, but it feels good, right? So I think those little features that I used to not care about these days are really, really good for people.
No, that's good advice. That's good advice. Make everybody feel included, especially for the people who aren't typically used to working at home, right? That's been sort of an interesting thing we've been hearing as well is, for example, I'm home with my wife and kid, and I know you're home with your family as well, but there's also people who are home just by themselves. And so just reaching out and letting them know it's like, hey, I'm thinking about you. They're little things, exactly like what you just said, but they go a very, very long way to helping boost morale. It's very important right now.
Absolutely.
So very cool, Dux. Before we shut it down, we obviously thank you for taking time out of your busy walk, if you will. Anything else before we turn it off and tell everyone to tune in for the next time?
No, and like I said, everybody just hang in there, be safe, take care, wash your hands, stay as far as you can from Brad, and until the next episode.
I was not expecting that one, but Dux, as always, thanks again. Everybody else, make sure to check out those links down below, hit subscribe button, and we'll catch all of you right back here next time.